Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Middle East Institute. For those who don't know me, I am Ken Pollack. I am the Vice President for Policy here at the Middle East Institute. We're absolutely delighted to have all of you here for this joint session with the Israel Policy Forum, a partnership that we are thrilled to be pursuing today and hopefully for many years to come. We're delighted that we can bring you this program as well at this particular moment, because obviously in the wake of the recent conflict between Israel and Iran, there's a lot to be talked about, a lot that needs to be said. And I will say that in addition to this event with Israel Policy Forum, about which we are so thrilled, we're also going to be doing a kind of a partner event or a sister event looking at the Iranian side of the Israel-Iran conflict, which we're hoping to bring late next week. But for today, our topic is Israel, and we have two absolutely fantastic speakers. Those of you who have been with me before know I'm not a fan of long introductions, but I'm going to give Shira and Seema a little bit more of one so that they get their just deference. So first, Seema, to my immediate left, Seema Shine. So Seema is one of these people who's been in a whole variety of different roles throughout her career. I like Seema for a lot of different reasons, starting with the fact that her analysis is outstanding, but I also feel like we've had kind of parallel careers. Every place I've been in the US government, Seema was in the Israeli government, just at a higher and more important level than me. So Seema was at Mossad, where she was the director of research and estimates. She was at the NSC, where she was the deputy director. And she was at Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs. And since then, she has been at the Israel's INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies, where she founded the Iran program and is now a senior researcher. To her left is Shira Efron. Shira is, I want to make sure I get this properly. So Shira is the research director at IPF, but she is also the Diane and Guilford Glazer Foundation Senior Fellow at IPF. Shira is another person who's had a long and distinguished career, and I think many in this room know her because, of course, Shira founded the Israel program at the RAND Corporation, and she founded it and ran it there for 6 years and became a very well-known fixture here in Washington. So we're delighted to have both of you guys here with us at this joint event between MEI and IPF, a wonderful meeting of all of the minds. The way we're going to do things is I'm going to start by asking Seema and Shira a set of questions. I'm going to try to knock out the biggest, most obvious ones so we can get that out there, talk a little bit about that, and then we'll open things up to questions. We, of course, have an audience online as well, and we'll try to take questions, alternate between those in the room and those online. So for those of you who are interested in asking a question online, please simply use the raise your hand function. You can find it at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're not familiar with it, there's a little hand button. Just press that and it raises your hand and lets us know that you'd like to ask a question. And what will happen is when we turn to the Q&A portion of the conversation, I'll simply ask for whoever the next person online is. Please do introduce yourself very briefly. Your name is probably all we need. If you'd like to also indicate your place of employment, that's fine as well, but just so the speakers know who they're speaking to. And with that, we will dive into things. Oh, and I apologize. I should also point out we are on the record here. So everyone, please be aware of that. And with that, I will now dive into things. So I'd like to start, Seema and Shira, by talking about Israel itself and how Israelis have kind of come through the war. Shira, if it's okay with you, I'd like to start with you. Give us a sense as best you can of how you think the Israeli people came through the war, what their experience of the war was, and then let's pivot a little bit and also talk about the political parties and how did they emerge from the war. Obviously, Israel has been at war for many, many years, and this is not Israel's first experience of at least rocket attacks, but this was something different. And in particular, the scale inflicted on Tel Aviv was different. So tell us a little bit about the Israeli people and their politics. And then Seema, get yourself ready because I want to ask you about the IDF and how it felt about the war. Sure.
Hi, Ken. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. You didn't mention that my first gig in this town was an internship at MEI at the Middle East.
Greatest importance.
Right, the Middle East Journal. I was an editor there, and I taught Hebrew here to 3 students. One was Lebanese, the other one was Jordanian, another one was just, cliche American Jew marrying an Israeli. But it was really... I love this place, and it's great to be back again. So I'll try to be brief about it. I think there was an anticipation among the Israeli public. There was a lot of prep that a strike on Iran could be imminent. Right? It wasn't a complete shock. The way it was done, I think, for many Israelis was a bit of a surprise because now it's funny to talk about, but we were awoken at 3 a.m. to a very strange sound to tell us that Israel hit Iran and that we should be on alert. But nothing actually happened in Israel that day. But there was, I think it started with, there was a lot of fear. We were already in 20 months of war, but it was very clear that a war with Iran is going to look differently than a war with, Hamas or with Lebanon or other proxies. And we know in hindsight that the sort of the threat scenarios, what Israel prepared for was a grave death toll, and basically the Tel Aviv. I mean, I know we're on the record, but there was a fear that Tel Aviv skyline would no longer exist. That was something that the Israelis were embracing for. So there's a lot of fear, but immediately, and probably Seema can speak about this, the advantage of the surprise and why the Iranians were so surprised is still a mystery to me. But the fact that they were so surprised, the operation became extremely successful. So the Israeli public, there was a lot of fear, but there's also some sort of national pride that this is going very well. And I guess there was this tension between the fear and, people died, and there was substantial damages to residential buildings, but also, according to foreign sources, to military bases all around the country. I mean, there was really substantial damage. There's a lot of fear and waking up in the middle of the night, and people had to leave the comfort of their homes to go to public shelters on the street with their, I mean, it was really, but on the other hand, there was a huge public support for this operation, largely because it was successful. And also because, as Israelis, we're taught to that Iran is sort of the head of the snake, the head of the octopus. There's always a different animal, but that there is a different, that Iran is orchestrating this campaign against Israel. So it was just do whatever it takes and do it. And I think also in a rare moment of unity, also, the Israeli press was talking about it nonstop, and they were applauding the operation, and the impact is, and there are a lot of debates on whether this will lead to the intended right, what we want, and unintended consequences. We can talk about this, but if you want to talk about the Israeli psyche, in the Israeli psyche, this is portrayed as a victory, which is really interesting, because when we talk about Gaza, technically you can tell the same story, right? The military achievement is not completely done, but you are telling a story of victory. So this is a narrative, but there is an understanding this is not completely over, and there's constantly there are constantly rumors in Israel in terms of, will there be another one? What does it mean? Can we go on summer vacation? What does it mean about our flights? What do we? But there was one rumor like that last week. Politically, I think we all saw Netanyahu basically started his political campaign. I didn't remember, but someone from MEI reminded me that I said it on the MEI podcast, that Netanyahu would now visit the Nero's kibbutz, where it was the worst hit kibbutz in October 7, which he avoided until now. So he's portraying it as a victory. Obviously, not only striking Iran and leading to a very successful military operation for which he's taking credit, but also bringing the Americans in, which is something that most Israelis thought was impossible. And if you look at all polling, it's the Netanyahu bloc. It's a parliamentary system, so you need to create a coalition. So the current coalition doesn't poll high. They have 50 seats at max out of the 60. So polling maybe hasn't changed dramatically, but this assumes that no one from the current opposition or those are on the sidelines and would not join Netanyahu, which I think is not a fair assumption. He's seemed as a strong man, a statesman. That's what he's playing on. And I think that's stop with that.
Okay, that's great. And we're definitely going to come back to that point about, is this war over? Because I absolutely want to talk about that. But Sima, let me turn to you next and give us your sense of the security establishment, of the IDF, of the intelligence community, of the security establishment writ large. How do they see Israel having come through this? Obviously, there is a sense of victory, as Shira said. What does that victory mean, and the cost? Where's the security establishment right now? And again, we're definitely going to get to this question of future operations and where are we headed.
As usual, you ask a question, I answer what I want to answer, but of course I answer. Of course I will answer your question, but I want to also to add to what Shira said about the public, because I think it's very important. One is, but very shortly, one is the fact that for years the Israeli population hears from the government, and in the last 15 years it's the same prime minister, we will not allow Iran to get to a nuclear bomb. And the notion of Israel attacking Iran is penetrated into the minds of the people for years. It's not a new one, and people were in a way prepared, I would say, to that. So that's one thing. The other one is that it happened after around 18 or 19 months of war. And this war, and this is, I think, a very important element, this war was initiated by Hamas. And we know that it was a surprise to Hezbollah and to Iran. But without Iran, it wouldn't happen. And the understanding in the Israeli public that this war could happen because Hamas felt that they have the back of the Iranians, and they knew that they have this cooperation with Hezbollah, with the Houthis, with the militias in Iraq. They have been preparing themselves in the last 4 years before the war in the war room in Beirut to such a scenario. It was a surprise to the others, but they were prepared and from Israel's point of view, it was understood that Iran was the problem. And the third point on this issue is that it happened after 2 rounds of attacks between Iran and Israel. Iran decided to attack Israel for the first time in history on April, and the second time on October. And from that point of view, I just want to remind ourselves, the first attack on the night between 13 and 14 April, they have sent 500 different flying, I call them flying things, missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and UAVs. Big number. I mean, 500 is a big number on a state like Israel that is a small state. There were a lot of talking at the beginning that they did it. They knew that the anti-aircraft system will work, and CENTCOM with Israel. That's not the answer. They took into account that there will be a huge damage with just a big number of missiles and UAVs. And from Israel's point of the society, there was already a way of, as if we know how it happens when it is with Iran. So I put aside these remarks, and I go back to your 2 questions about the IDF and Mossad. So first of all, it's already known that the IDF has put before the decision makers a picture that it was much more with much more casualties than it happened. So the decision to go to a war was on the background of an understanding that, as Shira said, we'll see it in Tel Aviv and in Haifa and in our military bases, and the numbers of casualties were there are
4,000.
I don't think they came to 4,000, but they're around between 400 and 800, which is a huge number from Israel's point of view. So this was the background of decision makers, and still they decided to go for that. Now, as for the army has prepared itself for this scenario for a long time. In the past, and especially in the last half a year, around half a year. And with a lot of exercises, with a lot of fueling, how they fuel on the road, without a lot of planning together with CENTCOM. So it wasn't a surprise. It was very well prepared before, and I think even the. No, I will add to that two other things that are important. One is the situation, the experience that they got from the two rounds of attacks in Iran. And the second is the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria. So from Israel's point of view, the skies were... Israel attacked at the beginning, after Bashar left Syria, attacked several systems that were anti-aircraft systems in Syria and others. And from Israel's point of view, there was an understanding that the way to Iran through Syria will be quite open, which was a very important element. Now, I cannot say that there was a unanimous acceptance of the idea. As far as I understand, there were different positions, but at the end of the day, we know what was the decision. And I think from the military point of view, the combination of the intelligence on one hand and the capabilities of the Air Force were at their best. The cooperation between them, the way they worked, was at the best that they have ever done before. And I think this is the main reason why it was so successful. Because it's not only that they had a very good intelligence before, but it was also the capability to produce intelligence during the war, during the attacks in Iran. And I don't want to elaborate on that anymore. I don't know, but this is something that it wasn't only an arsenal of intelligence information that, you know, evaporated after some days. No, it was developed through the war as well. Now, and here I would also mention the cooperation between the Mossad and the IDF. Which is also not it's not completely unusual. There were in the past, but all the things that were in the past were very small events. It wasn't a war like that. And I think this is also part of the success of this war. And when I'm saying success, I want to put it into a context. It's the operational success. Then we'll talk probably what is the results of all those attacks, and whether they are completely, obliterated or not obliterated the nuclear program.
We're in Washington. They are completely obliterated.
Sure. I hope so. But I think from the military point of view, the combination of the military with the Mossad and the military with the intelligence in the military was very, very high and very effective. What is interesting about the Mossad is that as it happened previously in Lebanon with the pagers, it's not the first time that we witness an event that we could imagine only in Hollywood, which is really fascinating from the point of view of the combination of intelligence, technological capabilities, high technological capabilities, and high operational capabilities. The three together. What we saw in Iran was the ability to do it simultaneously with the attack of the Air Force. So things have been happening in different places in Iran at the same time. And I think the surprise, the huge surprise that the Iranians, in spite of the fact that they have been, I don't know why, but they have been talking so much about the possibility of Israeli attacking them and what would happen if Israel will attack, and still they were completely surprised. And I think part of the fact that, as Shira mentioned, that the first 24 hours were quiet, I think part of it is because they were so surprised.
Great stuff. Okay, I'm going to come back to a number of those different factors in just a moment. But now I want to turn to Shira. And Shira, I always do this to you, and you always blanch when I do it to you, but you always do such a great job that I can't help myself and I have to do it again, which is I want you to help us understand the Prime Minister's thinking in terms of, exactly.
There's no way I'm doing a good job.
In terms of moving forward, right? As you already suggested, as I think everyone in this room knows and probably everyone online knows, there's a real chance that this isn't over, that there are going to be additional rounds at some point in the future. Help us to understand as best you can how you think the Prime Minister is thinking about when and under what conditions he might order additional strikes. What are the things he's thinking about? Obviously, there are these peripatetic negotiations, which may be sort of getting underway someday. That's obviously a consideration. There's the threat of Iran reconstituting. That's an issue. There's just how generally the Iranians respond and activate what's left of the axis of resistance. Right? There are a lot of different calculations and considerations. And he's obviously thinking about his domestic politics. I at least assume he's thinking about his domestic politics. I assume he's also thinking about the strategic situation, about the relationship with the United States. How do you think he's thinking about that? Under what circumstances do you think he might either restart this thing or just do something small to remind the Israelis or remind the Americans? Take us through your thinking on that, or his thinking, I should say.
Before I try to go into Netanyahu's mind, which is a place I fear going into. Not because of this, because he's became unpredictable. I'll just a couple of anecdotes on what Sima said. I think from some friends in the IDF, there's complaints that the Mossad is getting all the glory for something small that it is, whereas Amman, the director of military intelligence, is not getting the full credit. So that's one thing. And the second thing that you may relate to, the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, right, gave a really impressive, I thought it was really impressive presentation of sort of the capabilities, and when we can be cynical about it, but it was really interesting to show sort of like the whole value chain, right? From the producers and the operators and this, and at the end there's a pilot that is basically the chauffeur that drops the thing. And in Israel, those who get the credit are the fighter pilots. But it's actually like, if you think of this Iran challenge that Sima dedicated her life to, there's a whole system of people that have worked on and continue to work on that don't get the credit, and there's some resentment. Like, see how they thank them and we don't get the things. So just on that, and this also tied into Netanyahu, of course, who takes full credit for this without crediting the probably tens of thousands of people that work on the Iran challenge. If you look at the multiple agencies and industries and other. So. Again, there are a few things. It's very clear that, Netanyahu's calculation was, we're doing this. And I think there was a lot of people who were very cynical and said that the motivation was political. And yeah, maybe politically to also help Netanyahu. But for him, Iran was a religion, right? And he spoke about it for decades. And has been threatening and trying to pull the Americans into this, right? Arguably, the JCPOA happened because the Israeli threat was so credible, and he was successful in conducting the strike and bringing the Americans in, thinking that this could lead to a high death toll in Israel and terrible damage, and still thinking that he's saving the Jewish people. And I really believe that's what he thinks in doing so. Then, President Trump announced a ceasefire, but neither side was aware of that. And I don't know if it was with Sima knows those guys better, but if it was a gun pointed to their head, you all of a sudden had the Israeli intelligence issue statements, the Israeli Atomic Energy Agency, which never speak out and issue a statement. And Trump also spoke about 52 Israeli fighter jets that were forced, that he told them to turn around, right? So it was very clear that Netanyahu was caught off guard with the terms of Israel wanted to stop to quit when on top. But the idea is, what are the terms of the ceasefire? What are there any terms? And what is the enforcement mechanism? And I don't know that there are answers to this. So when you're asking this, I assume that part of a big part of Netanyahu's conversations with Trump, or I hope, were about that. But we don't know what happened there. And the question of under what circumstances he would go again and conduct another strike, I think that largely depends on the green light that he gets from Washington, because it would be different this time. And Sima can talk about why Iran could be better prepared this time and why it's going to be different. I also think this Israeli strategy of mowing the lawn, as we call it, right? Of going to Syria and Lebanon and Gaza and the West Bank for years. It's different when you go far to a different country. And yeah, the Syrian airspace might be free, but there's some countries in the middle. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated. And without the U.S. having the defense umbrella, it'd be hard to do. And especially as the Israelis are happy that it happened, but they're also happy that it's over. So if he's going to elections, now there could be Netanyahu, a kind of wag the dog situation, starting a war to, again, anything is possible. That's why it's very hard for me to explain his psyche. But there's no question that if this doesn't turn into, if there's no agreement, and then we can talk about what does the agreement look like, because I don't know who in the U.S. will do the agreement. My understanding is they delegated all the tactical negotiations to the Europeans. But what's happening with the big thing? Israel will probably find itself facing a dilemma on when to strike again, and what do you strike it with the help of whom? I don't know what this also has to do a lot with what Iran does. In terms of just politically where we are, clearly is going to be where Israel is in an election year, and probably elections are going to come in the next 6 to 9 months. I mean, that's the bet, maybe less even. And I don't know if Netanyahu wants to be in the middle of a war. He could be. But there's also an option that, just trying to lay low, spin this as we have turned the Middle East. We have changed the Middle East completely. Ending the war in Gaza, or sort of like agreeing to kind of an end of the war in Gaza, develop a path toward normalization with Saudi Arabia, and sort of kick the can down the road on this question for the next government, which he may or may not be heading. So that's also an option. But Sima has more Netanyahu hours than I do.
So first, Sima, if you'd like to talk about why you think Bibi is, I'm glad to have you talk about. But what I really wanted to ask you was, again, about the IDF. And the intelligence community, and to pick up on that point that Shira made of, okay, what is the IDF thinking about the next round? What are their expectations for what Iran may have learned, what they may be doing to make things different? What did Israel learn? If there are future rounds of this conflict, how's the IDF thinking about it? How is Israel's security establishment thinking about it? How would it look different? How would it look the same?
Well, first of all, to make sure that everybody understands, I don't know what happens in the IDF, and I'm not in the Mossad for 15 years, so I don't know. Everything I'm saying is my understanding, nothing that is related, because people might think that I know something. I would say that, first of all, everybody understands. I think there is quite respect to the Iranian capabilities. It's very different from everything that we know around us on our borders. And we know that it's a huge state, it's 90 million people, they have a very developed infrastructure, military defense and other established infrastructure. It's something different from everything we know in our wars with other countries. And I do hope, I don't know, but I do hope that there is no kind of hubris that we did such a wonderful war and everything is a piece of cake for us. No, I don't think so. I think the Iranians will learn and go back and see what happened, why it happened. And I'm following what they are talking and what they are writing. And it's very interesting to see that there are people that are not afraid to talk and to write of what happened, and in a very, very high criticism on the system. Which is not very usual. I think that in Iran they understand the depths of the collapse of the system in this war, because it's not only the capabilities of Israel that were shown, which are by far more than they have expected, but it's also, and even more, the collapse of their own system, the fact that they saw that they can deter Israel at the beginning, then that after deterrence didn't work, that they will be able to retaliate in a way that Israel will, as they said, will be sorry for the day decided to do it. So there are many things that they thought will be different, and it didn't happen. And the volume of penetration of the Israeli Mossad to the system, if it's the security system, if it's the civilian system, I think all of these elements were much more than they have been thinking in the past, and I think that they will go back and learn everything and try to improve themselves. We already see it in the last days. We hear the Iranians saying that they had air defense systems that they hold in order to replace those that were struck by Israel, and they have shown picture. I don't know if it's one battery and not more, but they are talking about replacing the air defense system. They are talking about just in the last 24 hours about launching space vehicle, which we know that is always they didn't launch, that just made the preparations and computer and other things, but we know that they use it in order to improve the capabilities of their ballistic missiles, of course. So I think I hope Israel is thinking about all these elements. We know that the Iranians are now in new connections to the Chinese. They hope to buy things from the Chinese because the Russians are so deeply involved in the war in Ukraine. Probably they don't have enough capabilities to sell any missile systems and others. And I think that the Israeli army and the Mossad have to, everything that was very successful, you cannot use anymore. So you have to invent something new. And if it's tactics of operational tactics, if it sources of intelligence, and all of that has to be renewed, and all of that has to take into account that the other side probably has trusted what is, and therefore I think it's a different opera, as we say, when there will be, if there will be a second round. If you want me, I can say a word about the second round. Or
sure.
Yeah. Not that I know when it is going to happen. I hope it's not going to happen very quickly. But I do think that there is a growing feeling in Israel that the mission was not fulfilled. That the nuclear program was attacked. There are damages, but the capability of Iran to produce a nuclear weapon was not destroyed completely. Because of the fissile material that we don't know if part of it is under the trashes of or all of them or part of them or part are somewhere else. The Iranians have said before the war that they have spread the material in different places in Iran. We are sure that they have somewhere advanced centrifuge that they have developed during the years that the IAEA is not making any inspection on that, and deployed only part of it, and part is somewhere else. So there is a feeling that the capability, if they decide to do it, I'm not saying anything about the decision. I think they are far from that now in this time, but the capability still to have to break out for a nuclear device was not completely erased. And therefore, I think there is a thinking in Israel, and there is, especially with the Prime Minister, we heard him saying, what I saw in the Wall Street Journal is that he said to Trump that there might be a reason to go for second round. And from what I read in the Wall Street Journal is that Trump didn't encourage him, but didn't say no. So we don't know. This is the atmosphere, and we'll have to see how things develop.
Yeah, obviously, we're all going to be watching that space carefully.
Yeah.
Lots to talk about. I'd actually like to shift a little bit and talk about how the war may have affected other strategic and foreign policy issues that are critical to Israel. So let's start with Gaza. Obviously a very tough topic, but we're all aware that the military operations in Gaza continued. The situation in Gaza is very dire, and it is becoming an issue out there. So what I'd like to ask both of you, I'm sure I'll start with you, has the war and the success, recognizing Sima's point that it may be somewhat qualified, but nonetheless, the sense of a successful war against Iran, has that opened up new possibilities with Gaza? Has it changed anything with Gaza? Might we see something different with Gaza moving forward?
So I think yes, but first of all, just from a narrative perspective, right? And I think I said it before, the fact that Israel portrays the situation in Lebanon as an Israeli victory, and it does, and the situation in Iran as a victory, despite in both places we don't have, the Iranian regime has not changed its behavior, right? The military achievement is not perfect in either place. Hezbollah is it's a shell of what it used to be, but it's definitely not obliterated, decimated. So arguably, you could definitely make the same narrative argument about Gaza. I think it also changes things because from the Israeli perspective, right, you can say that, where it all started, you're going back full circle. Yahya Sinwar started his thing October 7, anticipating, hoping that his peers will join. They didn't. And one by one, Israel, through kinetic actions, was able to deliver a remarkable shift across the Middle East. And we may see, it may not lead to anything good, but it also may, it has changed. And going back, Israel can say, well, in Gaza, now that we addressed the Iranian threat and we restored our deterrence, now it's time to close the full circle and change the situation in Gaza. At the same time, there's quite a dissonance, right? First of all, when you see an adversary that Israel respected and actually trained for, and Gaza, we talk about Hamas, the Palestinians in general, but if you talk about Hamas, I mean, not only we did not prepare for addressing it. I mean, anyone, and I think this is now public information, that anyone working in the defense establishment know the directive was from the political rank was to keep Hamas in power, to make sure Hamas is kept in power. Sorry, Sima, I'm sorry. Oh my God, how embarrassing. It's only oh no, but we're in the air conditioning. Could have been nice. Sorry. Here, I have another one. So the idea was, thank you, that Hamas was to keep Hamas in power. weakened, deterred, and effective. And Israel had a big role in turning Hamas from a contained terrorist organization into a sovereign, de facto sovereign of a territory that became, monstrous. So this is one thing. The second thing is, while the opportunity is there, and Sima and I spoke about it yesterday, Gaza is not just a foreign policy, defense, national security issue. It's a political issue. It's an ideological issue. The Palestinian issue inside Israel, because it has to do with what we call, the Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, the fatherland, right, the motherland. It's something that, when you talk to Israelis on the far right who happen to be religious, the biggest argument with them is, when did Zionism start? So whereas some people in this room, would say that Zionism started 100 years ago, they would say it's thousands of years ago. And that's where the debate is. And then there was no, 67 borders. So I think the question of can you use the success, the military success in Iran to close the door? Of course. And even without it, Hamas used to be, right? Hamas was Hamas. Can you guys even tell me who is the big person in Hamas? No one knows them. I mean, there's one guy, Zadin Haddad is one person. Hamas is a shell of what it used to be. There's no command and control structure. It's a guerrilla organization with that controls a very small territory. Lost its any legitimacy that it had with the world. You have not just the United States, but also the Europeans. You have the Arab countries around, which were always like, okay, well, in the name of stability, let it be it, saying now that they want Hamas gone. They're willing to help Israel in Gaza in ways that they were never willing to help. They have red lines. They're not going to take any Palestinians and probably not going to put a lot of boots on the ground, if any, but they're willing. So all the conditions are there, in fact, to tell quite a good story, but that requires a political willingness on the part of the prime minister and his government to nod to a future for the Palestinian people, to talk about some sort of political horizon, some sort of connection between the West Bank and Gaza, some sort of link to the Palestinian Authority, which they're not willing to do, not because of national security considerations, but political considerations.
Sima, what would you like to add to that? What's the...
Gaza is a political decision. It is a political decision in several aspects. One, it will bring to the end of the war, and that means investigation that everybody is demanding, and Netanyahu doesn't want. That means the question of elections, because all the time they say, you want elections during war? Do you want war? Okay. If there is no war, so it's and of course what Shira said about the right, the extreme right in the government, that they are threatening to leave the government, or the religious parties have already left the government, and now the two other right-wing government parties are saying that if the war stops in Gaza without achieving what they call a full victory, God knows what does it mean, and so they will leave the government, and this government will be a minority government. It's already a minority, but it will fall. So it has a lot of aspects, and therefore it's not only a question. No, it's not only. It's completely not a question of security, national security. It's a political issue, and therefore it's very difficult to say. Of course, one has to understand, in spite of everything that Israel has done, changed the Middle East, God knows for what yet, but changed Gaza and Lebanon and Syria and everything that happened, the trauma of the 7th of October is there every day, with everyone and every day. So it will not vanish because of the success of Iran. And one could see it also in the polls. The polls, the first polls after the stop of the war with Iran didn't give Netanyahu high percentage more than before, because people, on one hand, are happy to see that it was so successful with Iran. On the other hand, they are still under trauma, and every family has someone they know. If it someone that fell in the war, if it's someone that was killed in the kibbutzim on the 7th of October, if it's on the festival, people that went, there is it's a small country, so each one knows. If I don't know, I have my neighbor that knows, and so Israel is things are not. This is not in a ideal world. When you look on things, you could say after Iran, the prime minister will come and say, okay, we have such a victory. I stopped the war there. We'll bring back the hostages and everything. And no, it's not connected in any way. He knows and he understands that in spite of the achievement, people don't forget what happened on the 7th of October and blame him for that. He is trying to blame the army and the Shin Bet and the interior security organization, but people blame him because everybody knows, he was talking, everybody knew that he was talking about the Hamas against the PA in the West Bank, and not only that, he was sitting in a meeting in the Security and the Foreign Relations Committee in the Parliament, talking about the plans of Hamas, exactly what happened. So he cannot say that he didn't know, they didn't wake him up, all this story that we hear. And therefore, it's a very, very difficult combination, political combination, and the decision will be a political one.
First, Shira, I have to note that you did such an incredible mommy thing there just a moment ago, mopping up a spill while simultaneously never missing a beat to discuss Israeli politics. I was just incredibly impressed by that. But before we get off it, I did want to ask both of you, this is an event ostensibly about Israel after the war. We'll ask Shira something related to that, but Sima, I can't not take advantage of your expertise on Iran, and I want to ask you one before we move to Q&A. So, Sima, for you, how do you think? Well, I'll make the question simple, but you can, as you will, take it in whatever direction you want to. Do you think that the war has changed Iran's grand strategy toward the region, toward Israel? I see at least three schools, one of which is the mistake was we had a good strategy and we got away from it on October 7. And then there are the build a bomb, be more aggressive. And then there are the reformist, make peace with the Americans. Do you think it will actually change Iran's grand strategy? Let me start there, and then I've got one for Shira before we move to the
Actually,
audience.
I must admit, this is the question. There is no other important question, and as always, there is no good answer, no good one answer. I think, as I hinted before, there is a debate in Iran, and people are rethinking what happened, because just very shortly to say, all the strategies of Iran have collapsed. The strategy of the proxies that they have built, they have put such an enormous amount of money and training and everything, collapsed during the war with Israel. And the notion why they built this, what we call the ring of fire around Israel, was to prevent a war against Iran, against the Iranian soil. And what happened is the contrary. They were in a war, and the proxies, not only that they could not prevent it, they could not retaliate. And we know that Hezbollah immediately said, well, Iran has all the capabilities to retaliate. They don't need us. Of course, they don't need us because we cannot do anything, Hezbollah in Lebanon. So I think this is a huge collapse, and I'm sure that that it will be very difficult, even those that are very loyal to the regime, around the leader and everything, to ignore it, because it's so obvious. At the same time, if I'm looking what they are saying and how they are saying, and if I'm taking my experience with this leader, and at the end of the day, it's the same leader. for the last 40 years, or less than 40, 36 years or something like that. And for his way of thinking that was very much shaped during the Iran-Iraq war is the resistance. We got a huge blow, but we will resist. And the resistance will, at the end, will survive. And I think he's not able to change. Of course, not to change. You have to understand that it's combined also with the debate that was ongoing in Iran about an agreement with the US. And it's the same leader that in May 2018 suffered from Trump the leaving of the JCPOA. So once he went against his own understanding with the others in Iran for an agreement, and he saw what happened. Now he went again against his will and against his understanding of the West and of the US to 5 rounds of negotiation. And 2 days before the 6th round, Israel attacked and the US supported and joined. So he doesn't see an option for a change. And from his perspective, changing the policy now and going and giving in everything that he didn't want to give before the war, the zero enrichment, now he will go for that. What does it mean for his own people? That he...
All right, Shira, last one for you. You mentioned elections, and last time I had you at an event, you talked about the prospect that Iran would be Bibi's swan song, that this would be his legacy war, and he would drift off into the sunset. Quickly, because I do want to turn to the audience, but what's your sense of, will Israel have elections, and will this war be the end of Bibi Netanyahu's political career?
Sure. Just before that, I agree with Simon. Pretty much everything in life. I totally agree that that this success or perceived success in Iran would not erase Netanyahu's responsibility for the worst, right? For the worst failure in Israeli and Jewish history since the Holocaust. And by the way, it's not just the failure itself; it's the fact that the country has not returned to fully function afterwards, right? Even if the military succeeded during the war, everything else failed. So this is something I agree. But there's no question Netanyahu and his partners are trying to spin this as sort of from colossal failure, from Holocaust on people to redemption. And you even heard people in the government saying that it's good that the October 7th happened because it led to this miracle, saying it with their own words. So it's not. So I think that because we're in a world of narratives, even Netanyahu wanted to use Iran to close Gaza in a way that he can. And I think there are indications that this is what he's trying to do. The problem is, this is where we get to the difficulties. In a sense, Iran is a very complex problem, but it's a problem that for now there's like the Israeli kinetic action and maybe there'll be an agreement. Gaza it's kind of like Iraq, think about it, but you're next door. We went in and we destroyed the governance that was complex, that was a terrorist organization, but we destroyed the governance of a system with 2 million people and all of the physical infrastructure of Gaza. Gaza is decimated. And it's decimated. So now it's really a problem. How do you portray a victory and what comes next? And the fact that Israel's refused and Netanyahu himself didn't allow to even discuss and create backup plans for Gaza day after, and still till this day, it's not allowed. To the maybe between men and Dermer, but not the Shin Bet, not the IDF, no one, is the fact that it's complex. Because let's say that he says, okay, end of war in Gaza, we finished, you, Izzadin, bye-bye, or someone looks like him, we exile them, we're starting de-radicalization. Okay, who controls Gaza? I mean, there's no plan. There's really no plan, which is really frustrating. There could be a plan, but there's not one in place. So, but on your question, I mean, there will be elections, I think. No, Israel is still, I mean, there's still elections in many countries. Even non-democratic ones. There's going to be elections in Israel. I don't know. Michael Koplo here, my colleague, is actually much better on Israeli politics. But I think all assessments are the Knesset has 2 more days of work. 2 more days of work. 3. 3 more days of work. Probably within those 3 days or after, we will have a ceasefire declared, the 60-day one. The Knesset is not like here. Israel takes 3 months off. So during those 3 months off, his coalition, his government will be sort of, you can't break the government during recess. And in those 90 days, many things could happen. It could be either a draft bill for the Haredim, either trying to break into a peace with Saudi Arabia and acknowledging the Palestinian state. Anything is optional, but it's not. Most likely in the Bibi way of things, he's going to juggle and play for time and kick the can down the road and probably going to make a decision very last minute. I think the calculation is elections would come I don't think it can be before December, but not after June either. So my bet would be March. I don't know. And then the question is, and this is something that not just me saying, that because Netanyahu is now, how old is he? 77? 77, 78? 78? Anyway, that there are expectations from his family members to leave a nice inheritance, that he can go and give talks outside that he needs, and he has 3 years to do that. He's not in perfect health. No, this is something people are talking about. He's not in perfect health. So if we talk about legacy, after Iran, the last thing to do is open up the talks with Saudi Arabia. And so if there could be a grand bargain that has to do with the end of the war in Gaza and changing the conversation, clearly I don't think normalization is going to come with Saudi Arabia, even if Israel closed the war with Gaza today. It's going to take some time, but changing the conversation on that and pardoning Netanyahu or canceling the trial, which is the biggest thing, then there's no reason why he would not go. And this would be his legacy. The trial is an issue because there are 3, you can get another attorney general, you can do something with the court system, or you can get the Israeli president to pardon him before there's a verdict, which happened only one time in Israeli history, and it was done by the president's father. But he's not willing to do this. So completely different circumstances that you could talk about it. So anyway, the options are there, but if Netanyahu is going away, I think our talk about Naftali Bennett is all going to be irrelevant. It could be Yossi Cohen, it could be very other players that could be coming. And if there's elections, we'll see. The idea is that for him, the strategy now is to make sure if he can't form a coalition, the other side will not be able to form a coalition either. And then he's going to count on defectors and his political skill.
Terrific. Okay, let's open things up to questions. If you've got a question here in the room, if you can take your name tent and put it up like that, I'll call on your turn. And then for those of you online, please use the raise hand function, and I'll be alternating between folks here in the room and folks online. And please do introduce yourself, just your name and affiliation. So, John, please go ahead. There's a microphone coming.
Good afternoon, Tom Kahn from Israel Policy Forum and American University. Thank you for this phenomenal program. Isn't there a danger now of Israeli overconfidence with the great victories against Hezbollah in Syria, Iran, and particularly to juxtapose its intelligence brilliance there with the absolute catastrophe of October 7th, where intelligence completely collapsed? And relatedly, or unrelatedly, but say what Israel could possibly offer the Saudis that would actually get some kind of a deal, because Israelis are talking about a new Middle East and peace, but to me it seems very, very unrealistic.
Well, you are asking the most important question, and there is no good answer for that. And I think the best answer to say why on 7th of October it didn't work and in all other cases it worked is that the problem of the 7th of October was not intelligence. There was intelligence. The question was one, how it was interpreted. What was the thinking? 2, I'm sorry to say it, but I say it also in Israel, the hubris of the Israeli security establishment, Hamas. they have been working for years on Hezbollah and Iran. And therefore, when they went after Hezbollah, they succeeded. When they went after Iran, they succeeded. They put all their resources, all their thinking, everything on Hezbollah and Iran, because the immediate threat on Israel was foreseen to be coming from Hezbollah. And that was true. And I think nobody took seriously the capability, the possibility that Hamas will do what they do, what they did. People were thinking that they might do something small, get into one kibbutz and do something. That was the maximum of the imagination of those who saw that Hamas will do something. And therefore, I think part of it is to put the blame on the security establishment, unable to think in such a way. But the other part is the political side, because for years, it is all now in the open. There were those, especially in the Shabak, that were coming to the Prime Minister, suggesting to him to go for assassination of the leadership of Hamas, because they say they are planning several things. He didn't want to do it. From his point of view, the situation that there was a separation between the West Bank and Gaza was important. You cannot have a two-state solution when you have three states, one in Gaza and one in the West Bank, and the more Hamas is, as you say, controlled or weakened
and effective.
Yeah, how do you do it? But this was for years the understanding, and it penetrated also to the security establishment.
Just Tom, on Saudi, I think there's a big thing in Israel. There's a whole conversation which I think is flatly wrong. This whole like peace through strength really caught on, and this idea that now when everyone saw Israel's incredible military achievement, the Saudis and everyone else is going to be knocking at Israel's door, and I think this is completely misreading of the region where they are and what they see. There's tremendous fear of Iran, and actually taking additional risks with Israel would not be the right thing. Where there are interests, there are economic interests, there are military interests, there are ties between Saudi and Israel already, so you'd argue that they don't have an incentive to take the risk because they're getting what they want from Israel as is. They can get more. There's this IMEC idea and other cooperation project, but I think that what would be, and at least the Saudis that I speak to, and I don't claim to represent the whole what the kingdom wants, but they want stability. They want quiet. They have Vision 2030, and all these other countries are investing in a detente with the Iranians and with the Houthis and stuff. And this understanding that trying to sideline the Palestinian issues and ignore it didn't work. It interferes with their visions that are motivated by self-interest, not for the love of the Palestinians. So I think what Israel can give them now is end of war, stopping to see those images from Gaza. And I heard from Saudis that they're really scared of radicalization of the youth inside their homes, right? This is something that is affecting people around the Middle East. So they're scared of not how it affects Israel, how it affects their ability to fulfill their agendas, especially Saudi. And I think, if Saudi changes their mind, all the other countries would follow. But this is the major thing that Israel gives them now, is putting a lid back on this issue, and in the immediate. Of course, the sky's the limit if you talk about this integrated Middle East and other things, but I think the immediate priority is just closing this and having something. They wouldn't settle for an end of war, but it also has to be connected to something real or semi-real on the Palestinian issue as a whole.
Great. Let's take the first question online. If you can identify yourself and then ask your question. Carrie Douglas?
Thank you. So my interest is in the value of and the future of international humanitarian law And given the IDF soldiers that were recently arrested in Brussels and then released, what is the value and what is the future of international humanitarian law for the Israelis? Thank you.
All right, which of you guys would like to take that one? Sima, you're going to take it?
In this town, no attorneys.
First of all, they were very quickly released because they were not connected to anything that happened there. This event in Brussels. I think that there is a lot of information coming out of Gaza. Part of it correct and part of it just fabricated. We know that there are reports from the beginning, not even now, but from the beginning of the UN that have been based on information of Hamas, and not of counting how many tracks were getting inside Gaza. And it took some time and a lot of work, including a very important paper that was published in the INSS, my institute, and that the UN had to admit that it was based on partial information. So I don't want to say that there is no problem in Gaza. There is a huge problem. And of course, part of it is because Hamas is stealing the humanitarian aid and selling it for 3 times more in order to have resources for what they need. So the bottom line that I want to say, I'm not an expert on the humanitarian issue, but the bottom line that I want to say is, on one hand, there is a problem in Gaza, and there is a problem of not of famine, but of lack of enough food. But on the other hand, there is a lot of disinformation that is coming out, and in any case, I think that it's time to end the war in Gaza.
Regev?
Hi, Regev Ortal. I have a question on the longer-term strategic Israeli considerations on Iran's nuclear program. On the one hand, it seems to me, and I think in our conversations, that there's no actual military way to obliterate Iran's nuclear program, right? Even if you destroy every single centrifuge and destroy all of the uranium, there is still the information and knowledge and ability to then pursue this in the future. But oftentimes, I think when that conclusion is reached, then the next conversation is about an agreement. And so my question is there an agreement that is both stringent enough and actually will be enforced enough to prevent the development of an Iranian nuclear weapon if the regime decides to develop it, if there is interest in the Iranian regime to develop it? And if you don't disincentivize the regime from developing the weapon, then should Israel assume that one day Iran will have a nuclear weapon? And if so, what should Israel do to both protect itself and address that problem?
Okay, so let me, we don't have too much time, so I'll do it very shortly, but not, there is a lot to say about that. But first of all, one of the, we didn't talk about that, but one of the lessons that Iran has to take from what happened in the war, especially from the fact that the US joined the war, is that there is a commitment. And I think this is very important. From Israel's point of view, it's very important. There is a commitment of the US administration, the president and the administration, not to allow Iran to build a bomb, which is very important. It is much more important than it was in the previous time when everybody was saying that this is the aim, but now they show that they are willing to do it. And Iran has to take into account that once they do steps that will be obvious to the other side, that there are steps in the direction of a nuclear bomb, that someone or some ones, more than one, will attack them. So I think this is a very important element. The other one is, I agree, a state that wants, decides and is determined to get to a nuclear bomb will get to it one day. But what I think is more important is to make the conditions for a way of thinking of the other side, that it's better not to reach this point than to reach. And this is the main core of an agreement, as well as of a military attack, to make the other side understand that this side, this way or the other, he has to make things that the world, and it's not only Israel, you have to look on what the Europeans are saying to the Iranians today, and the Europeans were believed to be less strong on these demands than the Americans and the Israelis, of course. They are demanding the same things today. Iran has to take into account what is more important, the regime or a bomb. If they saw that a bomb will preserve, forget words, will preserve the regime, they have to understand that a bomb can destroy the regime. And I think this equation at the end of the day is important for both directions. I personally would prefer an agreement, because once you have an agreement, and I think there is a possibility to reach an agreement that is not the perfect one. The JCPOA was not perfect as well, but it can be better than the JCPOA, and for a longer time, which is much more important, the timeline, the sunset, and the inspection of the IAEA. I think these elements can be reached because Iran is in its lowest point from the security point of view, and I think they are willing to go for something. The question, of course, is it possible to bridge the demands on the American side and the Israeli side with the Iranians? On the Israeli, I'm sure there is no possibility, because from Israel's point of view, no enrichment is the demand. I think Trump is saying that he has the same demand, no enrichment, but I think there is a flexibility on the US side, or small flexibility, and there is a small flexibility on the Iranian side, but there is a huge distrust between the two sides, and it's very difficult.
Okay, Simi, you can't just leave us hanging there. You gotta tell us what you think the deal looks like.
It depends on the eyes of whom are looking on the deal. So I take out Israel, because I think Israel will not like any agreement, because one has to understand an agreement with Iran means the removal of all sanctions, means a lot of money pouring into Iran economy, which is in a very, very dear situation. And of course, capabilities to support all proxies in the region. So the dilemma of Israel is more than just the agreement, the very closest of the agreement. It's the notion of Iran getting back money that is frozen outside, a removal of sanctions, the capability to use the banking system, to export oil. All of these things is a huge problem for Israel, that knows that Iran will use this money for bad things. But having said that, if there is an agreement, it should be it should be in some aspects very close to the JCPOA, which Trump thinks that was terrible, but unfortunately there are the things that were okay in this agreement. One is the low enrichment. Two, low number of kilograms of fissile material that stays in Iran. No advanced centrifuge, which is very difficult with Iran today. It was okay in 2015, but not today. Inspections that are not only on the declared places that Iran is declaring, but also in places where there is a suspicion of something that is relevant to the nuclear, and Iran should allow the inspectors to go there, which is much beyond the subsidiary arrangement between Iran and the IAEA, and the timeline, the sunset. It should be for 50 years and not for 15. Yeah, I said low enrichment and low numbers of kilograms that are stay there. So that's the framework, but there are so many other details, and it's very difficult to see if it's possible, we didn't mention a very important word here in the room, snapback. And the question is whether there is enough time for such an agreement, because there are so many details. One can look for a framework agreement, a frame of agreement that talks about these specific issues that I mentioned, but the details, and there are so many details because the program is very wide. And the question is now, how can you bring back the IAEA if Iran doesn't want to cooperate on one hand? If Iran will, for instance, will ask, the agency will ask where are the kilograms of the 60% enriched, they will say buried in the Fordow, who knows? So it's very, very difficult today, much more difficult than it was before the war. Very difficult to go to reach an agreement, and within a month, not more, a month and some days, the Europeans told and Trump, the Iranians, that if they don't get to an agreement, there will be what is called the snapback, bringing back all the sanctions of the Security Council on the nuclear issue without the capability of Russia and China to veto this decision, because it's part of the JCPOA. And the main, this is my last sentence, the main effort that Iran is doing in these days, in the last 2 days and in the coming days, they have a meeting in Istanbul with the Europeans, they have a meeting today with China and Russia in Tehran, and they have called the Egyptians, and now the Egyptians are calling everyone else, and they are doing all the efforts they are able to do in order to prevent the snapback, because not only because it will bring all the sanctions back and all the sanctions of the Security Council back, and it will be difficult for them, it's also because they have committed themselves to retaliate if this snapback is coming back. And retaliation means, one, leaving the NPT or doing some other things, and it can escalate the situation even more than it is already. That's it.
If I can just add to this, I think the big issue is that what Sima portrayed is sort of to get to such a complex agreement and under those conditions would be very hard, and you need someone to lead it, and arguably it would be the United States. This is where the issue is, right? I mean, there were some layoffs in the State Department with some Iran experts in that. No, I'm serious, because my understanding, and this I heard from the Europeans, that sort of the Europeans were delegated the tactical, using the snapback just to get the IAEA inspectors, but not the whole package. And this is, when you talk about even the snapback and the sanctions, but when you mentioned there's North Korea, and there's Pakistan, and there's China that maybe will not be able to veto sanctions, but, there's an expectation that China may help or may not help, and you saw this little rendezvous between India and Pakistan where China was able to finally ever show that they produce supposedly high quality platforms, right? So these are all things that someone needs to manage, and without the U.S. managing this, and I don't know that there's an answer in this town to this, but who's going to do it? And as Sima said, I think Israel is not going to voluntarily push for an agreement. So the ball is really in this court.
Okay, we'll take one more for online. Lawrence Poster, would you like to answer your question?
Lawrence Poster, Catalyx Group. So first, a very quick follow-up. As part of an agreement, don't we also need to see Iran being controlled for its terrorist support financially and in every other respect? Now, the question that I was about to ask, we all know, of course, about Israeli failure in October 2023, but what about Israeli failure about not knowing about the 500 miles of tunnels, or at least publicly we don't know that Israel knew about them? What percentage of those tunnels have now been destroyed? But most importantly, if there's going to be a permanent peace in Gaza, we don't know what the day after looks like in terms of Israeli position, but there has to be a day after. And will countries in the Middle East, the U.S., participate, or is Israel going to insist on being in control of Gaza the day after?
Okay, we got 6 minutes to try to tackle at least parts of all of that. Sima, you want to start, or?
I'm not sure.
More comprehensive
I'm not
to include the terrorist activities of
of Iran. The issue of what does include an agreement was also in 2013-15. It's not a new issue. At that time, the U.S. wanted the ballistic missiles to be part of the agreement. The Iranians refused. This time, everybody, Europeans as well as the Americans, are talking about ballistic missiles, and especially after the war with Israel. The Iranians are not willing to, of course, not willing to talk about that. And the issue of terror. The issue of terror is, of course, the demand from Iran not to supply anymore its proxies in the region. I don't think Iran is going to, they are not going to give up on many aspects of the nuclear agreement. Nevertheless, about ballistic and about terror, meaning proxies in the region. So from Iran's point of view, supporting Hamas, supporting in the future, supporting Hezbollah already now, supporting the militias in Iraq, the Houthis. You just saw a week ago, there was a vessel coming from Iran to Yemen that was intercepted on its way, full of parts of ballistic missiles and other missiles and the air defense system and others. Iran doesn't stop. They have been hit and they have been killed. People, important people, the upper echelon of the military and the IRGC was killed, and still they continue supplying arms to the Houthis. So, and one has to understand, it's not only that the Houthis every night or every second night are shooting on Israel and we are going into shelters in the middle of the night, but they have stopped most of the trade passing in the Suez Canal. So Egypt is paying a higher price even than Israel with our port in Eilat. So the Houthi is a problem not only of Israel, it's also a problem of Egypt, but it's also a problem of the international community not being able to trade through the maritime. So I think it's not anymore an Israeli problem, Iran. Iran became a problem of the world, and I think people in all over the world, in the leadership of Europeans and others, understand it. This is the reason why immediately when the war started, when Israel started the attack on Iran, most of the important leaders in Europe came out and said Israel has the right to defend itself. And the Iranians were crazy about this support because everybody understands that the instability in the region is originated in Tehran. And not to talk about, we don't have time, but not just to mention the terror activities that are taking place in Europe when they want to kill the Iranian opposition people that are in Europe, and when they try to attack Jewish and Israeli places all over the world, in Europe, in Latin America. Just 2 days ago, we had 25 years of the event in Argentina with the embassy and the Jewish center where dozens of people were killed by Iran and Hezbollah. So this is a source of instability in the region and in the world.
2 minutes, Shira.
Okay, so first of all, I think there's an assumption built into right, that there must be a day after in Gaza. And a day after can also be what some people in Israel call for, which is, full Israeli occupation of Gaza, military rule, return of Israeli settlements, and that's also a vision for a day after in Gaza. So I don't know that the vision of a day after in Gaza, where Gaza is governed by someone that is not Israel, is I think it's the only feasible, sensible way to go forward. And most of the Israeli public doesn't want to see an occupation, but I wouldn't rule out this option. There's also another option that Gaza will just stay like this for another 50 or 60 or 70 years, and no one would want to invest in its reconstruction in the absence of an actual plan. When we talk about a sort of a plan, the plan that everyone is talking about, and I think for a good reason. And there are different permutations of the plan. If you look at the Egyptian plan and the Emirati plan and some sort of Biden administration non-paper plan that Trump may adopt and call it something else. But the idea is that there will be some transitional interim Palestinian administration in Gaza that is not Hamas. And now you can call it whatever you want. You could call it PA, or with a dotted line to the PA, you can say it's Fatah. You can say it's groups related to the Fatah and the head of the Fatah is the same head of the PA. It's a two-party system. There are not that many options, okay? So, but non-Hamas administration, that if you have that you get the support of the Arab countries, and this support is varied. You know, the Egyptians say they're willing to put some people on the ground. They call them advisors. It's not boots on the ground. The Emiratis may put, yes. The Moroccans, yeah. I doubt Saudi is going to send actual boots on the ground to risk their lives and also defend Israelis. And you get the support of the international community in reconstruction, and no one will put money into this if there's no some sort of formidable option that this is not just another round of fighting. And this is the option. My operating assumption is that Hamas is not going to disappear. It's going to remain a spoiler. And therefore, Israel will probably, and this is what Israel is demanding, Israel wants a freedom of action in Gaza. The ability, the whole sort of like the security responsible, the peripheral security responsible will still be on Israel, which is sensible given what happened from Gaza. And this goes back to why it's the only sensible solution is to bring something that's affiliated with the PA, because I know of only one entity that is used to coexisting with Israeli freedom of action and occupation, which is the PA in the West Bank. That is what's happening. So again, it's a political thing. It's kind of a theater of absurd that Israel says no PA when in fact it works with the PA. And I'll just end with this, that I think we can see cleavages in what Netanyahu is saying and Ron Dermer is saying, and they're saying, well, not PA, yes, Fatah, and they said no PA, but in the previous ceasefire, and in Israel people don't talk about it, the Rafah crossing, the border crossing with Egypt, was open for exit of Palestinians for medical reasons from Gaza. And despite Israel saying no PA, it was manned by Palestinian security forces in uniform and with a Palestinian flag. So it's kind of like, and I have an article comment about it, it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell thing, that this would be the solution. It would let Israel climb back down from the tree of the no PA. It would let would give the PA something, and would get the rest of the world on board. So this solution is there, but both of the sort of players, Israel and the PA, have to agree to it.
Well, we could obviously go on for hours and would never lose a moment's enjoyment or at least interest in all of it. But we have to bring it to a close here. Let me begin or end by thanking once again our terrific partners with Israel Policy Forum, Michael Koplow, Rachel Brandenburg. Thank you for bringing such amazing speakers over here. Shira, Sima, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for doing this for all of us. For those of you online, I hope you enjoyed and appreciated all of this. For those of you here, please join me in thanking Shira and Sima for such a phenomenal presentation.